I'm Leilani at Performance Reel, and today we're fixing a customer's Kifco Ag-Rain. It's a T30, and the turbine seal has leaked, which has caused the bearings to fail. So let's get to it. First, we use a 13mm socket to remove our cover. Once we got the cover off, I realized we forgot the 22mm with us in the field, so I ended up using our adjustable wrench to remove this impeller. Then I used a strap to get this guard out of the way. Next, I removed the belt, and I took an Allen key to remove the pulley and tapped it off with the rubber mallet. Then I took a pair of snap ring pliers to remove this retaining ring on the back of the turbine. Then the key was a little challenging to get out, so my dad helped me with that. After a little struggle, we eventually got it out. If we were in our shop, we would have left the key and taken it out when the shaft was in our vise. Then we removed the key in the front. I would definitely recommend having a magnet handy in case you drop this key into the turbine housing. Then we removed the shims and the spacer and the spring portion of the mechanical seal. Then we used a block of wood and a hammer to knock the shaft out of the back of the housing. Once we got the shaft out, we removed the second part of the mechanical seal, which was ceramic. It is important to note that the O-ring of the ceramic seal is left behind. You definitely want to get that O-ring out so that the new ceramic seal will fit. Oops, I did not get that O-ring out into the turbine, but I fished it out. Then I used a nylon brush just to clean up where the mechanical seal would sit. I did not use a brass wire brush because the housing was fairly clean. This is one part of the mechanical seal. It is very important to handle with gloves because oil from your hands will cause it to fail. Since we can't use oil on it, we used some dish soap to make it easier to press in. We made sure it was firmly and evenly seated. Then we opened and inspected our bearings and washer to make sure that they were the correct size. Then we took the small bearing, the double bearing, and our washer and placed them on the shaft. The smaller bearing went on first, then the washer, then the double bearing. Some of you may have two smaller bearings and a spacer that has been replaced with a double bearing and a washer for better operation. Then I took the retaining ring and installed it into the groove on the shaft. Then we installed the key in the shaft. And then we used a rubber mallet to install the shaft from the back of the turbine housing. It took a bit of pounding, but I was eventually able to get it fully seated. I had some trouble with the large snap ring, so I got my dad back here to help install this. We checked the shaft to make sure there was no excess play, which there wasn't. Then my dad used a rubber mallet to install the pulley on the shaft, and then he used an Allen key to tighten it down and make sure it was securely in place. Then we used our dish soap to make the second part of the mechanical seal easy to install on the wider part of the shaft. Just a quick note, the white portion of the seal goes in and the spring is facing out. Make sure the whole spring is on the wider part of the shaft. Then we installed our spacer, followed by 5 of the very critical mylar shims that keep the impeller from rubbing on the back of the turbine housing under pressure. Once those were seated, we installed the smaller key in the front. Next, we installed the impeller into the shaft aligned with the key. Then we installed the nut onto the impeller shaft. Once again, we are not thrilled that we forgot our 22mm socket and instead had to use our adjustable wrench and our pry bar to keep the impeller from spinning. Then we pushed downward pressure on the impeller and spun it to make sure it did not rub on the turbine housing. Finally, we installed our faceplate. One note, we did replace the O-ring on the inside of the faceplate, but sadly we forgot to take a video. We also mounted our pressure gauge and the lockout on the front of the faceplate, and darn, we forgot that video too. Finally, we reinstalled our belt on the pulleys and made sure everything turned correctly. Overall, this job took a little longer than expected as we were not in our shop. I estimate this would take 45 minutes to an hour and wasn't too difficult at all. If you have an Ag-Rain 1050, 25120, or 25130 turbine, this process will pretty much be the same. Thanks for watching.